Good evening. It's Monday, October 4th. I'm calling the Rules Committee to begin meeting. We have a quorum. Human Services. Thank you for that. We have a quorum. I'm going to move HS1, which is approval from the minutes from our last meeting on September 7th, 2021. Can I have a second for that?
Second.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite, second it. Can you call the roll, please, Nicola?
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Fine?
Aye.
You said Reed?
I cannot hear. Yeah, I can't hear, but aye.
He is here.
Oh, he's here.
Yeah. He's,
You said aye?
He said aye, yeah.
Aye.
Can folks make sure they turn on their microphone?
Councilman Revelle?
All right, that motion carries. We've approved the minutes. We have one person signed up for public comment, but we're not sure if they signed up for Human Services. Is Doreen Price on the line for this meeting?
Hi, Chair Fleming. I do not see Doreen Price online.
Okay, thanks, Luke. All right, so we're going to move on, as that's the only person we had signed up to. Our first item for consideration is HS1, the acquisition of public art donation, an ice cream throne, and I believe that Toby Sachs is here to speak to that and also give a presentation or an update.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'll certainly speak to Ice Cream Throne, and then my update is at the end of the agenda,
Okay,
wherever you want to take it. Good, thanks. So, yes, the Ice Cream Throne, you've seen illustration of it in your packet. Both staff and the Arts Council recommend that we accept this. I know that taste in matters of public art is always a very subjective matter. So as chair of the Arts Council, what I do is be guided by our public art experts in the public art working group. It was a unanimous vote to accept this. And I think a very important point to make is that as some repairs need to be made to it, and some questions have been raised in the packet about possible repairs down the line. Firstly, the donor is putting in $500 a year for 5 years for possible repairs. And secondly, and really importantly, we have a very robust deaccession clause in the donation policy, which means that the donor has to sign in advance that if at any time at our discretion, and the city's discretion, we choose to remove the artwork, which is what we would do if there were issues further down the line with repairs, then they must either take it back or we're at liberty to dispose of it. So that deaccession policy was the point I just wanted to make to this. Happy to answer any questions, obviously.
just for the public who are watching or paying attention, can you tell us where this sculpture is going to go?
Yes, it's between Bates Park and Fullerton Park.
Okay, Alderman Rafael?
So do we know that the donor has, in fact, already signed that acknowledgement about our right to return or take down the sculpture if we need to?
I don't know if they have done yet, but we would not accept the donation until they have.
Without that, okay, yep. I mean, it's a very fanciful thing. I imagine neighborhood children will enjoy it.
Any more comments? Councilmember Burns?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around the location. So it is on off Ridge, south of a parking lot.
It's on the northwest corner of Ridge and Lincoln. It's before you get, if you're at that intersection, it's not quite to Chandler.
But you will walk a little north on Ridge, and it's that open space to the left,
Right,
or on the west side,
yep.
right before you get to the parking lot that I think is the North Shore parking lot.
Right,
Okay,
the
I
medical
just wanted to
building,
make sure.
right.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then the final, what condition will we get it in? Will it look similar, if not the same, as the picture shown in the packet?
It will be repaired before we get it, and we won't accept it if those repairs are not satisfactory.
Okay, all right. And I guess my question is more so the finish of it. Will that be the
finish
finish
is how
would
it
be-
looks. It's got that sort of aged patina
Right,
thing.
okay.
Yes. No, the repairs are just there's a couple of places where it needs rewelding.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Well, let's see. I lost my agenda, sorry. Oh my gosh, where's my agenda? I have a paper right in front of me. Thank you. So that one's for action. Let's go ahead and vote on this one. And then Toby, while you're standing there, we could just go ahead and have you do your update as well.
Thank you.
Can you call the roll, please, Nicola?
Councilmember Braithwaite? Aye. Councilmember Fleming?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
All right, so that motion passes for the acquisition of public art. And then we're going a little bit out of order, but since you're standing here, Toby, why don't you go over the Evanston Art Council update?
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. I've got a little presentation which is the same as in your packet there. Thank you very much for making time for this. I come once a year to tell you what we've been up to. We are currently 12 members, and you'll find visual artists, theatre artists, music artists, a gallerist, a funder, which is a useful piece of experience to have on there, and I'm some kind of consultant. 7 of those people identify as BIPOC, 6 of them are women. And the little picture that you'll see there was our retreat in the last month at the Levy Centre. And one of the principal things we did there was really try and crystallize a vision of what we're trying to achieve. And what we came up with is that Evanston will be known as a place where creative expression is highly prized, richly supported, and serves the whole community. We're trying to live to that. I'll mention 5 things briefly. I know you've got a big agenda. What's going on to keep the arts alive, what we've done to reimagine our grants, who we support, what we're doing to work to increase our revenue, and then invite you to a party. So the arts really are roaring back. The community did a great job of living online and trying to cheer the city up for the bulk of the pandemic, but really things are coming back in a big way now. Of course, we've got the new Robert Crown sculpture. We've got performances happening all over the place, indoors and out. Lower is a fabulous exhibit that's just closed at Perspective Gallery, where Doug Haight spent 2 years working with persons experiencing homelessness in the community to get their pictures and get their stories, and putting a human face on those, I think, is a lovely little microcosm of why the arts really matter. Another page of the same, Evanston Made going from strength to strength, but tons of performances. It's a very exciting time. So what are we doing in all that? Well, over the last 2 years, we've really comprehensively reimagined our annual grant program, the Cultural Fund grant. I talked a little about this last year. I can show you more results this year. We overhauled it completely because of really 3 things. The pandemic, which changed everything. The heightened focus on racial equity in the country, in the city, and the lead that we get from this dais. And input from our equity working group, which has been working for 2 years as a part of and adjunct to the Arts Council. So the changes we made, first was to not limit things to 501c3s, but make these grants available to grassroots organisations as well. Because typically arts grants tend to favour more traditional, more structured groups, we streamlined the narrative questions to just 3, trying to make it much simpler to apply. And we provided mentors for less experienced grant writers, and this year 7 of our applicants took advantage of that. Most importantly, we made it very clear that applications from BIPOC organisations and programs primarily serving BIPOC communities or other underserved communities would be favoured. Of course, that was the most important single thing that we did. And we made sure that the judging panel was predominantly BIPOC, I think all but 2 in this year. And we've got some data that says we made some real changes. This year, comparing each time with 19, because that was the year before we changed the guidelines, our applications went up by 53%, so we were reaching more people and inviting them in. 50% of those had never applied before. Our same total of $30,000 was distributed to 22 grantees. versus 12 in 2019, so we were spreading the wealth more widely. And 36% of those grantees had never applied before. Again, most importantly, 86% of the grants went to BIPOC organisations or projects primarily serving BIPOC or underserved populations, and that's 19 out of 22 versus 3 out of 12 in 2019. So there's always more work to do in this area, but we've made a good start. We'll apply similar principles to our more informal neighbourhood grants moving forward. So where did the money go? Wide range of art forms that you see there and in the packet, and I'm certainly not going to drag you through this here, but a brief description of what the actual project was for each of those 22 grantees. Bless you. And in fact, Councilmember Braithwaite is largely responsible for this next slide. When I stood up here last year, he looked me squarely in the eye and said, "Toby, what are you doing about getting revenue from other sources, not just coming to us?" And we made some efforts. We really took that seriously. The top two items are things we have secured. We were lucky enough to get 50,000 from the Good Neighbour Racial Equity Fund, and we're in process of devising that programme where we did a wide listening workshop with social service organisers, and we're partnering with 501c3s who are direct social service providers to build community resiliency through the arts. It'll take the form of 5 artist residencies. What we found in that listening session is that almost all the 24 social service organisations that came to talk to us had done in the last couple of years an arts project of some sort that touched on their mission work. Not a single one of them was aware of what the others had done. So one of the big things that came out of it is there's a convening function to share best practices, but in the short term we have the opportunity to make 5 residencies to further that work. And then we've got 60,000 from principally the Albion Development, but we also wrote a grant successfully to the Evanston Community Foundation, and we'll be putting in money from our own public art fund as well to commission a new piece of public art in Fountain Square, in the south end of Fountain Square, the little pointy bit, to honour the Black experience. And that request for qualifications for artists will go out shortly. And then there are 3 things that we've identified and done the applications for, but we're awaiting decisions. Firstly, we apply every year to the Illinois Arts Council Association and normally ask for and get 10,000, which is offset against our 50,000 budget from the city. This year, we felt we had a much stronger story to tell about how we're going about our granting, so we quadrupled the ask. We've asked for 40,000, and we'll wait and see what we get in the next couple of months. The Arts Council had not applied to the National Endowment for the Arts for over 10 years. Then when I got round to it, I guess. So we did 2 particular things. One where we've applied for 30,000 for re-granting, which would double our cultural fund budget. Now we're spreading across so many more groups, we could really do with more money to hand out to make those meaningful. And that could be ongoing if we're lucky enough to succeed. One that's very definitely just a one-off, it's actually ARPA money that flows down through the NEA, is that they offer grants of 150,000 for general operating funds for arts recovery, so we put in an application for one of those. Again, we'll hear in the next couple of months. I really must underline, though, that we're trying to do our bit, but we would not have access to any of these other funds if we didn't have the support that we're very grateful for, the financial support from the city. It's absolutely imperative that we show that we've got city and community support in order to have access to these other funds. So Councilmember Braithwaite, we heard and we're working on it. And finally, going forward, I want to thank you for your continued support. I'm obviously going to ask you for your support in the upcoming budget process. We know how hard those decisions are. We'd ask you also to consider the suggestion that we put forward that 1% of our own ARPA funds might go to the arts in the same spirit that we put 1% of our public building funds towards the arts. And if we did that, the Arts Council would administer that to our smaller arts organisations who have had much less support from federal and other sources over these last difficult 18 months. But above all, come to the party, please. We have our annual celebration of a bright night for the arts on Thursday, the 4th of November at 6 o'clock. It's always fun. From 2 years ago, we've made it free in the interests of equity. The Mayor will present the Mayor's Awards for the Arts, and that's a public nomination process that's in train at the moment. It closes at the end of this week. And there'll be an arts showcase, not just of the visual exhibitions there, but some performing arts, some live music, some circus arts from Actors Gym, and probably a spoken word slam poet. It's fun, it's free, and we'd love to see you there. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your support, and delighted to take any questions.
Thank you, Toby. I would just say very quickly that I really appreciate you come every year. You give a very solid report. And I know when I first came 5 years ago and we were trying to get a mural on the South Boulevard underpass, it was a very different tone from the Arts Council then. So I really appreciate, I can't remember if you were on there or not, but I really appreciate the work the Arts Council has done to recognize different forms of art and things that are, you know, not as traditional as you mentioned, and also to move forward with granting some of the monies to local artists to do some, you know, some things that we don't always see. So I really appreciate every year you've come and you've increased your work in communities that don't always have art represented. So I really appreciate that. Councilmember Ravel and then Braithwaite.
Yes, Toby, thank you so much for the really exciting report about your achievements this past year. So you had the same amount of, I'm talking about your grants program. You had the same amount of money, but you distributed it to lots more groups. Were you able to fund their full proposals, or did they ask for more money than you were able to provide?
We had dropped the threshold for the 2 years to a maximum of $3,000 that they could ask for. So in virtually every case, they're applying for partial funding. We're very aware of the trap of partial funding if people don't have access to other funds. But in this instance, we asked them for what other sources of funding they have to complete the budget. So we know that the projects can all move forward. But we are really hoping that not from the city, but from these other sources that we've reached out to, that we'll be able to double or triple our total cultural fund and really give more significant amounts in future.
Right. And so those other grants that you're applying for would go to supplement our local grants program?
Absolutely. The bigger ask for the Illinois Arts Council Association would double the current amount, and then if we got the NEA regranting money, it would triple it.
Right. Yep. Thanks.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just thank you so much for always delivering a solid report. Thank you for answering the call of diversifying your funds as well as the way you program all over town. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Reed.
How are you, sir? I'm just curious if you can just give a few examples of the projects that were funded.
The projects that were funded?
Yes.
Yes. Do you mind if I just go back to my notes and...
Sure.
So not particularly in any order. Ashe is a youth performance of Black history in a Kwanzaa celebration that was done with Fleetwood Georgian and the Evanston Public Library. And that would be an example where it was being intrinsically organized within that community. Where we sometimes or the Mitchell Museum, hiring indigenous local artists to give free online workshops and demonstrations that are open to all. Art Encounter, which we've funded often over the years, and a part of that is EMAP that does the murals around town, most of them. But the specific project that we funded is an art partnership with the Center for Independent Futures for adults with intellectual and development disabilities. So that was an example of another underserved community that we like to see there.
Where is that? Or where did that go, or where is that?
So that's actually, it was interesting. We talked to CIFF recently about this, and they really appreciate the fact that actually their their people go out to Art Encounter for it. And they said that just like getting them out is actually an important part of it. Naively, I might have thought that Art Encounter going to them would be better, but they actually said no. It's part of the benefit that this is a purposeful outing, as it were. Stop me whenever you wish, but Evanston Art Center, it's for curatorial fellowships for BIPOC individuals to mount exhibitions of work by people of colour. And all the other details are in the packet there.
Yeah,
Couple of lines
thank
on
you,
each.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Toby.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Please give our thanks to the Arts Council. All right, next up, item for discussion. We have an update on year one of the Racial Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee here at the city. I'm not sure who's giving that presentation. I'm told they're online.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dr. Jan Clayton. I'm supposed to be giving the presentation, but I'll also be introducing our two co-leaders from the Ready Committee as well. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're ready to go.
Sure, thanks. So Kimberly Richardson asked if we could do this presentation. I understand that she is, in fact, in Portland, Oregon right now. So sorry we couldn't be there in person. I didn't realize that that was a thing that was happening. So we are online. We've got some Ready Committee members also dialing in. And if you don't mind, could I share my screen?
Sure, but can you introduce yourself again? I think some people might have missed that.
Sure. My name is Dr. Jan Clayton. I am a professor of public administration in the Department of Public Administration at UIC. And I have a little presentation that I can walk us through.
Luke, can you provide access to share screen, please?
Oh, I got it. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes.
Right on. Okay. So again, thanks for inviting me and us to share with you guys what we're up to right now. Really, we're in the first year and we're in the third quarter. We're rounding off the third quarter, but Kimberly thought that it would be a good idea for us to kind of share with you how the cake is being baked right now and to give you a sense. And kind of tough following the Arts Council because it's so visual and interesting and like connectable. So apologies in advance. This is a very text-heavy presentation with a lot of policy stuff in it, so it's not going to be as visually appealing. So again, my name is Dr. Kathleen Jan Clayton. I am a professor of public administration and I'm at UIC. Let me back up for 1 second. So one of the reasons why this project is framed the way it is, which is working with me and with my team at UIC, is because it's actually really deeply rooted in the field of public administration. We're focused a lot on the internal environment of the city and really the community within the city government. All of the staff that you will hear from and that are working on these projects are people who work inside the city, who some of them live in the city and really bring a level of local knowledge and insight that a set of consultants really wouldn't bring. And I really see myself as a public servant as well because UIC is a public university. So it's been wonderful getting to know the community within. So I'm going to show you real quickly what the purpose and outcomes of the Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, we call it READY. There's a lot of different versions. This is the one we're sticking with. So the purpose of this committee is that we're trying to shift our organizational culture towards more accountability, transparency, and fairness inside the city so that we can increase the accessibility of programs and improve the performance of our programs for all residents. So it's a very internal focused project around racial equity. Our outcomes are threefold. So it's to train staff in policy analysis, project management, and participatory practices for management and leadership development. We also utilize inclusive practices to identify and develop pilot projects, of which I'll go into further detail later on in the presentation, that will deliver tangible improvements to the internal operations of the city. And we also want an outcome to be resisting the siloing of racial equity into one position or project, and to train as many staff on as many levels as possible. So this is taken from your website. I understand that there's a new city council and you will be going through a strategic planning process, but this is what we started working with last year. And the question was really, in this list of 5 things, we see ensure equity in all city operations. And we asked ourselves, well, how do we ensure equity in all city operations? We kind of moved things around and thought about it and realized that, in fact, this is the image that best represents how we approach racial equity, which is the process through which we implement city council goals. So investing in city infrastructure and facilities, we want to ensure that there is equity in how we invest in city infrastructure, that there's equity in how we enhance community development and job creation. Same thing with expanding affordable housing and stabilizing long-term city finances. You guys feel free. I can't see you right now as I'm presenting. I apologize. So if you have any questions, just feel free to slow me down or just to ask a question. The real crux of this model is that we see operationalizing racial equity about organizational performance improvement. I'm going to give you a 30,000-foot image to kind of think about. The real important thing is the circle in the middle. That we do planning, but we immediately start a learning cycle where we're learning about what's happening within the city. We're co-creating some ideas around how we can improve processes, remove barriers, address longstanding issues. We go out and we test, and then we measure the improvement that we think we're going to be able to make. And the circle means that it's iterative. We do it a couple of times. We're actually right in the middle of our pilot project. So you're going to see a lot of words. There isn't a fancy, this is about as many images as you're going to see. But once we're done, the last part, the scaling, number 6, is in year 2. That's when implementation happens. But we make sure that we rapidly test what we think are the issues and what some of the viable solutions can be. Okay, who are we? So on Zoom right now, we have Megan Jones, Sharon Johnson, and then Kimberly can be with us, all from the city of Evanston. Megan and Sharon are co-leads. And then it's myself, and on my team is Austin Zamudio. He is a visiting research specialist with the Great Cities Institute. But who we are, the whole Ready Committee, is this list here. And I know that there's quite a few of them that have been able to join. Part of the reason why they joined is that we're actually starting to work on Ready 101 workshops that we're going to be able to offer to different departments and different groups that actually want to hear a version of what I'm presenting to you guys. All right, so first question, where is the Ready model from? All right. This is a extensively field-tested model informed by some of the best practices in public policy and management. There's several different nonprofits that do this across the country. And so I've taken a version of that and actually adapted it for, what I'll say are the special circumstances that we have in the Midwest. The second is that the model works because it actually focuses on organizational performance improvement and identifying key performance indicators. A lot of people have different definitions of what racial equity is or isn't. And the definition that we use is deeply rooted in public administration, that we really are looking at the technical ways that we can center racial equity to drive better internal processes. The committee is also turning out to be a training ground for new managers and staff who may not have opportunities to grow in their current positions, but as you all know, attracting, retaining, and promoting diverse staff from across the city is something that is always a challenge for a lot of municipalities. And elements of this Ready model have actually already been implemented and validated locally in the Cook County Forest Preserves. All right, so how did we select these committee members? So for this first year, this inaugural cohort, I worked with Kimberly, and what we did was we took diversity on several different axes. So it's race, ethnicity, gender, position, age, and experience. future cohort recruitment will actually be led by the co-leaders, Sharon and Megan, and vetted by cohort 1 members. This is an open process, and recommendations from directors is strongly encouraged. We actually gave a version of this presentation to all the directors about 2 months ago, and they were very interested and excited about what the pilot projects actually contained and how they could actually use the recruitment process for next year to offer these types of opportunities for up-and-coming members of their staff.
Kathleen, I
All right.
have a question for you about that one before you move on. So I guess my concern about this layout of the future recruitment is this vetting part. So if we want our organization to make, these organizational structural changes, I guess I would want, and maybe not now, you can email me, but information about what the vetting means. I mean, I would think that we want every staff member, outside of having too many staff in one department maybe, to be able to access, this training or program. So the vetting piece makes me a little bit concerned. And I'm also concerned about the recommendation from directors, because I think while we're trying to get to racial equity, we have to be very honest about, all the biases that exist in individuals and in institutions. And so if we're taking people based on some kind of screening, I mean, unless it's super duper clear, I'm just concerned we're going to end up with either like-minded folks or folks who aren't as well liked, or a variety of different things.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, not to get super in the weeds, and I'm totally happy to follow up with you on this work in progress. Let me give you an example from forest preserves. I mean, we did, for the first 2 years, we only worked with the top leadership to sort of get the cohort process and selection process going. What we're finding is that it should be a both and. There should be an open process. We should have metrics around what we want to see in terms of diversity. And directors do need to be looped in, because this is pretty dense, policy-heavy work. And what I mean by that is, even though we only meet 3 hours every month, there's a lot of sort of in-between homework that I call it homework. I'm a professor, I have to give homework out. So they have to go and interview people, or they have to pull data, or they might have to do some analysis. So them having the support, or at least the understanding of their directors around why this work is important, is something that we're looping in earlier in the Evanston project. So, but definitely, it's a balancing between all 3 of those. And when I mean vetting, it's just balancing between the different axes of diversity that we're trying to hit. But I'll definitely follow up with you. And
So I'm going to follow
sure
up to that, because I understand that part about making sure you have a balanced cohort. But if this is something we want to do as an institution, and understanding that there's lots of work that goes into it that's ideally people are being able to do during the workday and not having to do in their own personal time, but that directors wouldn't necessarily make a recommendation as much as they would be informed that, this staff member would like to do it, they fit into, good into this cohort, and this is part of their employment here at the city of Evanston. So, directors wouldn't be able to say, well, I don't want someone to do it because it's going to take a lot of their work day up. So that maybe is a conversation for me to have with the city manager's office, but it seems like that's putting more limitations on people's ability to participate.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're catching on to the challenges and look, institutionalized racism has existed for a very, very long time. Totally agree with you. We're in our first year. And if we're given at least a 3-year cycle to figure out where are those barriers, right? Where are we seeing sort of those recurring loops of sort of marginalization or exclusion, or ways that things get bottlenecked? Absolutely. I think that this is an iterative process, and I would hope that we would get that level of buy-in and try to construct a more inclusive structure and process, and we'll definitely share with you what we're thinking about doing.
Okay.
So the chunk of this is really, I mean, and I want to give a chance for Megan and Sharon also to pipe up, but here's the thing. The core of this work is very, again, policy heavy, so I apologize. There's a lot of words here, so I'm going to try to go through this as coherently as possible. But one of the questions we get asked is, well, how did you identify your pilot projects? Well, one of the things that I do at the beginning of the cohort training process is actually train committee members on some participatory research methodology. So they learned how to do one-on-one interviews in a structured way so that, we reduced bias as much as possible. And they identified city staff from across different departments to actually get feedback. Now, the common themes that came out, so they recorded all that feedback, and we did some content analysis to see, well, how many times did this word show up, and what are some of the common issues that are being cited by city staff. One was the lack of autonomy of city staff, lack of empowerment, and communication issues. So what happened after that is committee members self-assigned into policy areas. They kind of looked at all the feedback we were getting, and there were 4 areas that we saw a lot of sort of overlap, and they're like, okay, here's 4 areas that we can start exploring. One was language access. The other one was employee education access. One was managerial training, and it actually started out as evaluation, and I can tell a story about that. And then consistent service provision was the 4th. So between monthly presentations and training and a process of refinement, that is what we landed on. So this is the front slide, which has all 4 projects listed. And I know I don't want to keep you guys like way longer. And Kimberly was reminding me that this wasn't a lecture, so I didn't have 75 minutes to keep on talking about this stuff. So I just wanted to share with you, here's the top lines. We have 4 projects ongoing right now. The first one is around language access. The second is around employee education access. The third is equity and new manager training. And the 4th is equity and service provision. And so we can talk about all 4 real quickly, or if there's one that really pops out at any of you, please go ahead. We can rank order them in a way that, addresses your curiosity first so that we don't run out of time. Or we can just start with the first one if you want.
Well, is there going to be a time for us to hear from the staff, or do you do the entire presentation?
Yeah. No, well, so for this first one, I volunteered to do it, but absolutely, I don't plan on doing this again.
All right, so if we can get, I know you have a few more slides left, but we have a couple more things on our agenda. So if we can try to get through these last few slides rather quickly.
So what I would say is, I know that Megan and Sharon are on the employee education access and the language access team. So if you want to start with either one of those, then I can pass the microphone off to one of them. So
great. Let's start with, we can just go in order.
Okay. All right. So let's go to language access. It just so happens that's the first slide. Megan, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll try to make this quick. The language access group consists of me, Anjali Daly, Michael Van Dorp, Tashik Her, and Jessica Winbitter. So a fairly representative group from different departments. For this particular project, we started off with a desire to be more intentional about hiring and placing bilingual staff throughout different positions in Evanston. We thought that would be the straightforward solution, and we could just easily put something together and present that. But as we're having more discussions, we're talking about some things we've heard from different coworkers that ended up uncovering the feeling that there are some bilingual staff that were in the field that weren't stepping up to be the translator or interpreter because they weren't feeling like they were properly rewarded, be it with compensation or just recognition or some kind of flex time. So this led to us doing some focus groups. We actually did 3 focus groups with a total of, I believe it was 18 staff members that represented different departments and about 9 different languages in total. So we asked about their different experiences, different things they've been asked to do by coworkers, directors, etc., be it translating documents, assisting with customers in the field or at a desk or something like that. And right now, in an effort to address this lack of incentives for the bilingual employees to utilize that skill set, we are piloting a time bank reward system that'll compensate staff for filling those bilingual services, because in some cases, staff was spending a significant amount of time being that interpreter, being that translator, and that was taking away from some of their day-to-day duties. So doing something like this is really part of a comprehensive approach, because we do have a third-party language access system that we still be using that would begin to address some of the issues that we were seeing and things that we were hearing about. So this would recognize and actually value that cultural competency and also support the staff and residents that oftentimes feel marginalized. And this also would just really increase staff morale. So that's where we are now. We're still looking at some other municipalities to see what may already be in place and what may work or may not work, and see what we may be able to tailor to fit to Evanston.
Any questions from the dais about that one? Megan, I have a quick question, and so I know in the, what is it called? The Equity Committee, the committee of volunteers, of not staff, they have been trying to work on a language access. I think it's not a policy, but plan or something. Have you all worked with them at all?
Yes, actually, this started off with Paulina being in the group, who is no longer with the city. And she was pretty much the champion behind it. So we have a lot of that base information to inform what we were doing to get us to this particular point. And that's why we're thinking to have this particular pilot project, but also be comprehensive, knowing that the city does have this third-party language access company to use in the case for translating large amounts of documents or things like that. So we were informed of other efforts by staff to do that. So it's more working with the information that we already have instead of trying to recreate the wheel.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, if you want to hear the other co-lead, the next team is actually the education equity. So Sharon, would you mind doing that one? And then we can close it off after the first two. If you guys want to hear about the other two teams, be happy to send you the slides and have a conversation with you all.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Kathleen. Good evening, Madam Chair Fleming, members of the committee, Sharon Johnson, Workforce Development. I'm a part of the Equity for Employee Education Access, Team Copper, and we're responsible for the Training Education Opportunities Pilot. Our pilot addresses equity in training access for Union City workers for the purpose of self-improvement, as well as education access to associate degrees as well as bachelor degrees. And the team that I work with is Daryl King, Indira Perkins, and Kate Lewis Lakin. Sorry about that, Kate. So after interviews with employees, college officials, and internal Evanston consultants crucial to the implementation of the pilot, we use questions such as what was their knowledge of the benefit that they have for free college available to ASME union employees. We're working with the small sector of about a little over 300 employees. We're asking what type of training and certification that you're interested in pursuing, and then the reasons behind the interest or possibly the lack of interest. This is ongoing. So some of the benefits of the ASME free college is it's extended to immediate family members as well as free access online. You do have classes at your convenience. So that's available to employees at no cost to the city. We also explored potential barriers and wraparound services that may be needed to support employees while they're taking advantage of the program. For example, any additional time off or makeup time to do classes. So we've discovered that ages 40 to about 59-year-olds of the union group make up the majority of ASME union employees. 1/3 of this group are female and over 50% are minorities. So this would benefit union employees who desire to improve their professional skill set administratively, or technically to better serve Evanston and grow as a stronger contributor in their area of expertise. For example, bookkeeping. You could get an associate's degree in that, and I'm just using that as one example. And also, if you're in that arena, you could be a backup to a potential colleague, which is another good thing. So we feel that we have the opportunity to expand the skill set among interested employees. And this is good for retention, cuts down on turnover. There's a vested interest in addressing personal growth among the majority of employees. Again, over 50% are minority, who may have an opportunity or may not have had an opportunity otherwise to expand their learning potential.
All right, any questions from the dais for that one? All right, thank you, Sharon. Kathleen, if you could send us the rest of the slides, that would be great. We're going to have to move on from this topic. We have limited time left in our meeting and another item to get to.
Absolutely.
But thank you.
Stop sharing.
Thank you for your time. All right, we're going to go on to SSHS2. Was a conversation about creating a subcommittee task force to address gentrification and displacement. This is by Councilmember Burns. I'm also going to ask if you want to speak to this, Councilmember Burns, and add in your thoughts on the policy too, since they're kind of, is that okay for you to do? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk today about creating a subcommittee of the Human Services Committee called Here to Stay, and it is essentially an opportunity for us to think about how to operationalize helping people stay here in Evanston. We all, as elected officials and community members, would like to see, would not like to see people displaced and want to find ways to keep people here, but the barriers to staying in Evanston, when considering the cost of living here is hard to navigate, and especially at the individual level is difficult. And don't get me wrong, we have some wonderful partnering organizations around the city that are doing what they can on a day-to-day basis to help people. But I think we need to organize a committee to try to find some new ways and really just add. We need to add new members of our community to think about how to solve this problem, and I see this committee is a good place to start that work. Some of what I'd like the committee to take a look at is identifying ways to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing. We've heard that over the years from our community members who are providing it. It's important that we identify where that affordable housing is, who is the current owner, and what we can do to support them and preserve that affordable housing before the property is sold and those affordable units are lost. I also see it as an opportunity to develop a mechanism to help people or to expand the path to home ownership. And I mean that in its fullest sense: townhomes, single-family homes, tiny houses, condos. Councilmember Braithwaite talks a lot about the opportunity to place first-time homebuyers in town in condos, and that might be an affordable way to help people stay here. Duplexes, and then also two flats, owner-occupied multifamily units. There's opportunities for people to buy, buildings with 4 or 5 units and have their family stay in one unit and rent out the other. So that might be a path for people to stay here. And I think one way to create this mechanism is to create a neighborhood housing center that's staffed with caseworkers who can assist in qualifying residents for mortgages, addressing barriers to home ownership, which there are many, from credit issues to debt and student loan issues, and help with down payment assistance and so on and so forth. And I think also this committee can look at funding or finding funding for a down payment assistance program. They also can look at developing a home repair program using CDBG funds or other relevant funds. These are things that I think we do in one-off situations, and we may have done in the past, but as far as I can tell, we don't have kind of a rolling, ongoing program for down payment assistance, for first-time homebuyer program, for home repair. And so I see this committee as being able to take on that work to create those programs. Identifying locations throughout Evanston that are ideal for greater housing density. We all know that sometimes when there are these kind of large affordable housing projects, that the community that lives around the area come out in strong opposition to it in some cases. And so I think being a bit more proactive and developing some criteria to come up with ideal places to create that density that we all know we need in Evanston is something that this committee can take on. Reviewing and identifying city-owned, vacant, or underutilized property and analyzing it for redevelopment potential. What are the barriers, past proposals for the site, future opportunities? Again, we have quite a few vacant parcels in the Fifth Ward, and I'm sure we may have some in other places that are sitting there, and these are lost opportunities. We could be putting affordable housing there. And also reviewing privately owned vacant property and analyzing it for redevelopment potential. Again, what are the barriers? What are the past proposals for the site? And what are future opportunities? And then lastly, develop a system to identify and outreach to property owners that are at risk of losing their homes before they lose it to a bank or list it on the market. I really firmly believe that in order for us to either help people stay in their homes or to find property that is affordable, that someone else could buy at an amount that they can afford, we need to find property before it's listed. And so I have examples in my ward of people who, I met a guy the other day who said, man, my wife moved moved out of the state and out of the country, and I was left with this property. I have a remaining mortgage on it. I owe some debt to the city. I'm looking to sell. And it's a good deal. And so this is a wonderful opportunity where the city could step in, either as a purchaser to get a hold of the property, work with Rebuilding Warehouse or somebody to rehab it and get that property back on the market at an affordable rate. Again, our interest is not the same as a private company that is going to want to rehab and renovate and then sell to the highest bidder. We have an interest in selling that property at an affordable rate. There's another example where there's a home, let's say for $40,000 to $60,000. There was a fire or something that damaged the home, but it's still in good structural condition. Again, that is a wonderful opportunity for the city to come in, buy it for $40,000, $60,000, rehab it for $200,000, and sell it for $260,000. We get our money back, and now we've put a really nice big 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath unit home back on the market at an amount that the private market is just not doing. So I leave that as a final example. I'll send this out to the committee members here, but yeah.
Give some direction. So if I'm correct, to start a subcommittee of this committee, you need to write up, I know you just said it, but what it would do. Would this be a committee of just council members? Are you looking for residents? Would those be appointed residents? Mayor? So there's, I think those things, which I can't remember all of them. I think for our 911 subcommittee, we just asked people. We didn't go through the mayor or appointment because it's, the task force or whatever. So that would be my suggestion, to write it up, what you're looking for. Sure. All those kind of things, and then reach out to the parties that you think would be helpful in that work. And obviously you have to work with the city manager's office because you need a staff.
Yes.
To do OMA if you're going to have more than 3 council members on it, or 2 council members, or whatever the number is. I cannot hear you with no microphone.
I'm sorry. If the committee exists, then it doesn't matter how many council members on it.
Well, he has to do OMA. That's not,
right.
He's got a staff. He needs to get a staff.
And I see this, and I'll write this up. Some of it, I'll send this out later today. But I see it as a mix of community members and elected officials.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, a couple of things, and I'll just be quick because in the interest of time, to pay attention, Councilman Burns. So finding out the reasons why, when possible, people are leaving, I think is important. We understand there's affordability piece that can't be denied. We also understand that it's really the market that drives the price of homes in Evanston, and I think that's outside of our control. Another element that you may want to consider is, people come here also from all over. So there are people who leave for whatever their personal reasons are. Affordability, I would think, is the top, but not the only. While you're looking at this, and if it's outside the purview, we can take it off the map, but I also think attracting people is something that you should also pay attention to, because we get a lot of people who come in for Northwestern employment, family, and if building a strong community, I think, is the root goal of what you're trying to do, I think that should be a part of the component as well. But I'm lucky I'll definitely talk to you more, and I appreciate you bringing this up as an issue. Thank you.
All right, so do you want to talk about your policy idea?
The other policy is trying to work with this subcommittee to determine how we can prepare for the amount of evictions I think we may be looking at in the next few weeks. And so the referral that I made was to require that landlords provide notice to our health department before an eviction. And so I think there's a question of when we would want that notice. Do we want it when the eviction is filed? Do we want it 30 days prior to the eviction paperwork being filed? Do we want it, do we want to know, do we want it after the court decides that the tenant has to be out on this date, and we want to know 30 days before that date that an eviction is to happen? I mean, we can have that discussion, but my concern is that I've had a few cases in the ward where I get a call same day that someone is being evicted right now at that very moment, and they're looking for me to respond and help, and there's not much that I can do, that our health department can do, and that our partner organizations like Connections and others can do when it's a same day emergency situation. And so my thought was, what policy can we create to identify these evictions earlier, so that we can create we can work as a city with our partner organizational partners to create a plan for those individuals. So that was the intent of it, and we can talk about exactly how to do it. Director Ogbo and I have been talking over the weekend about it, so I'm sure he'll share his opinion on it, but that's what the policy was about.
And my question for that is, Director Ogbo, is it still your department that does the landlord registries?
No.
Or that moved to?
No, that moved to property standards, which is in community development.
Yeah. So my only suggestion for that maybe we want to loop them in, because I imagine, and I'm not sure, we might have some evictions of, landlords are supposed to register their rental units and they don't all do that. So I just want to make sure, I would want to definitely do what you want to accomplish here, but there's also some responsibility on the landlords. So we make sure people are living in safe, licensed, places as much as possible, right? If a tenant is being evicted and they also have been living in not a habitable place, we want to make sure the landlord has some responsibility there. So is this, given that the eviction moratorium, I think, is already ended, I'm pretty sure the county is not going out to evict people, but I know people are starting to receive notices. Is this something that maybe we could work on, and you can determine kind of the staffing and all that, and bring back to council instead of coming back to this committee, so we can get it moving?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I can work on, but a number of things that we have to keep in mind is, if we are providing alternative housing for individuals, we definitely need a specific or an identified funding source to house these individuals. Of late, we have been housing a number of people who are in this predicament in hotels, and that can get expensive, especially in situations where relocation is not achieved or not foreseeable. So these are things that we'll have to consider if we're going to go into this business. And not only that, I want us to be sensitive of people's plight, but we also do not want individuals who will want to take advantage of the policy. So this is another thing that we will have to consider, and whether the department will go in a full-fledged or a comprehensive funding, a comprehensive housing program, if it's something that we want to also do. So there are a number of elements that have to be reviewed and revised before we conclude as to how this policy will be driven.
All right, so let me clarify then, because that wasn't that's definitely a whole other thing. So just to clarify, Councilmember Burns, you're looking for, and obviously we'd have to work with legal and make sure, I don't know what all is public record and what's not, but you're just looking for simply the landlord to give us notice, either when they're filing, when the person's gone to court, whenever along the process, so we know the person's up for eviction, and then we can connect them with connections or. So you're not looking for us, every person that's going to be evicted is going to be housed, because we
And the
definitely
other,
cannot
the other
afford
piece
that.
of that is the landlord will be provided information from our health department about different homeless prevention organizations or programs, whether it be through connections or some other program, and they will be then required to give that information to the tenant, basically. So that's the part that I forgot to mention.
So the landlord will let us know they're evicting somebody, and then
we send them information, they send it to the tenant.
would it make more sense for us to send it to the tenant?
We talked about both ways. I'm fine
Okay.
either or. Yeah.
But you're not looking for us to then, when people come and say they're being evicted, whether it's the tenant or the landlord, for us to put that person into housing, because that is not
I made
sustainable.
another referral that I think we should figure out how to get into this committee or council to create a victim services fund, not just to pay for emergency, hotel expenses, but there's other expenses that come up in emergencies. But that's a separate referral. I do
Right, and
think-
that one will
yeah.
get here probably next month, but that referral, if I'm correct, had to do with emergency situations, not just you're being evicted.
Not just
Because
being-
we're going to have a lot of evictions, and I, much as I want people not to be homeless, I don't know where we would have the money. And then my concern is if we start putting one person or this person or one case into a hotel, it's a small town, world travels, and then everybody. Like, I have a gentleman who's being evicted at the end of this month in my ward, and I have not offered him a hotel because that's not something I can offer to everybody in my ward. So I have to be really mindful of that. As much as I don't want him to become homeless, I can't offer a hotel to everybody who's being evicted. So,
And I think this notice, if it works in the way that I'm seeing it in my mind, hopefully it helps prevent people from needing emergency housing, because now we have a 30-day window or longer, depending on when we require the notice, to work with them, to be able to find housing with a family member, friend, or a shelter, et cetera. So that's the hope, is that this won't lead to us needing to provide emergency housing as much as even we are now, because we do provide it on a case-by-case basis.
We
but
do,
I understand the concern.
which is something that when we bring up your referral, which again should be here next month, we need to flesh out, because I know Ike is very kind and does try to offer things case by case, but again, I can't support that policy because we just don't have the money to do it for everybody, and I don't want to be in this situation where I'm telling one resident you can have a hotel and the other resident, like, sorry, you're being evicted. All right, Councilmember Reed, and then we're going to try to wrap this up so we can get to rules.
Yeah, I just want to add that because of that very point there, that I think the earlier we can have this in the process, I think if we can get it 30 days before they're planning to file the eviction notice, if possible. We already have a 10-day notice now that's required, so potentially extending that by 20 days, I think would give us a good enough window of a couple of months before people are physically removed from their residence.
And I just want to be clear again, we don't have anything right now that requires our health department to be notified, because I hear a lot of people saying, well, we have this and that, which we have things, but I want to be clear, this is notifying our health department that an eviction is to take place, and then requiring that they send out information to the tenants. So I want to be clear, we do not have anything like that currently. And then my only thing about, I think we need to tie it to an action, and we've talked about this offline. Requiring someone to do something when they think about it, but they haven't taken an action, I don't think is a sound policy. But if we can tie it to some action, then I think it makes sense, which we could talk a little bit more about that offline, but that would be my only concern.
All right, so I would suggest everyone who has some input on this, maybe get it to Director Ogbo. Given the sensitivity of evictions, if you think you can bring something back to council, bypassing this committee, please do so. But we also understand, you have to make something that's going to work for your, we don't want a policy that's not going to work. So I would just chime in. I think 30 days, when they file the eviction notice, makes sense, because people are not going to eviction court right away because they're backed up already. So that still gives us some time All right, so seeing no further lights, did I miss anybody? All right, we're going to adjourn HSC at 6:50.